Hello, and welcome to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. This is Chris Shelton, the critical thinker at large.
And this is Ruth McLeod, the Southern Atheist.
And that was Pale Blue, introducing us to our 9th show.
Whoop, whoop.
Yep, very happy to be here doing this, and have some interesting things to go over this week. In the wake of the shooting at Roseville last week, we have a lot of media, a lot of stories covering that, a lot of different angles taken on it, and it's given us some time to reflect on what happened without, the immediate. Last week, we were literally broadcasting our show or recording our show the day it happened.
Right.
And so you were getting last week our very raw, very visceral feelings and emotional reactions to yet another, of the horrific mass shootings that occurs and have been occurring over the last 25 years here in the United States. And so now we've had some time to reflect on this, and as a critical thinker, I've put some thoughts together, which we'll go over. But first, I must comment on the fact that we have just over 2 months until the December 14th premiere of Star Wars: The Force Awakens in Los Angeles. I could not be more excited.
You could not be more of a nerd.
Totally. It actually will premiere everywhere in the U.S. on the December 18th. But if you're in the Los Angeles area, as some friends of mine are, then you will be able to see it on the December 14th.
See, that's just not fair.
Totally not fair.
I mean, I haven't even seen all the Star Wars, but I know that's not fair.
No, it's completely not fair. And if you're in the UK, you'll be able to see it on the 16th of December. So
what?
I know. Well, actually, in Europe and in Australia, they often premiere these movies week or two before the United States distribution. That was the way with all the Marvel superhero movies. My Australian friends and my European friends got to see all of those and were, posting all over my Facebook wall about how awesome they were. And I could just grit my teeth and,
Yeah. See, I'm not allowed to act as jilted as I am right now, since I am not a big fantasy sci-fi person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll sit there and support my partner and go with him and sit there and roll my eyes every now and then when he looks at me like a child and yay, lightsaber, something. I don't know, but I'll be there.
Oh, I cannot wait. I am
a week after UK. That annoys me.
Yes, very much so. So moving right along here. So this week I'm going to do what I'm going to call the critical corner of our show. And by that I mean I have a bit of a statement I've put together or some thoughts I've put together that I'm going to go over here, and then we'll sort of take it up and talk about that after, see where that kind of goes, and then we will be talking about the news.
You have a better way of being able to sit down and get your thoughts collected like this, whereas I'm more of an emotional person.
Yeah.
Which can be a negative thing sometimes, so I get why.
With the rush and emotional reactions of a catastrophe or disastrous occurrence, such as the Roseville, Oregon shooting last week, it's hard as a human being to maintain a wholly objective point of view. Human beings are creatures of passion and instinct, and we feel the need to act to preserve ourselves and our loved ones in the face of disasters. Sudden losses of life are always emotionally devastating, but when the cause of the disaster is man-made, on a gut level we want to retaliate, to have some kind of justice enacted, or, failing that, at least punishment or revenge. It doesn't take a Psych 101 major to know that this is fundamental to our psyche. If you hit me, my immediate instinct is to hit you right back. It's when we stop and contemplate these actions in the calm after the incidents, when we can reflect on the causes and effects, that we start thinking in terms of morality and civility and what would be the best thing to do over a longer period of time than just the immediate, you hit me, I hit you back thing. So it is that over this last week, I've been giving a lot of thought to the issues we have been talking about in regards to gun control and gun rights. As any good critical thinker should do, I've been taking time to look at all the sides of this issue, and it was in doing that I realized the real problem with this, and so many other issues that plague us in the social and legal arenas. With guns, the problem is simple. People with ill intent and of questionable sanity are too easily able to carry out campaigns of random and undeserved violence against innocent people, meaning people who have done nothing to deserve to be killed. Now, in all of the media and articles I've seen over the years, and especially over the past few weeks, no one with any degree of common sense or intelligence has denied that this is a problem. The very passionate and emotional arguments enter in when it comes down to what to do about this problem. So if I could, I want to bring up a few points for your consideration. I would ask that no matter what you think should be done or what your position is regarding gun rights, gun control, mental health, the government, and all the rest of the things people argue about with this, just think about what I'm saying here. First off, if you're looking for a single source of the problem or a single solution to the problem, there isn't one. At least not a practical one, because the only solution that will end the situation of people randomly killing other people forever is to get rid of all the people. If there were none of us around, that would solve the problem forever. I'm not being totally facetious in saying that, because it does happen to be the only single solution that does handle this once and for all. Since I think most of us would agree that we aren't going to all go commit ritual suicide on our front lawns to wipe out our species in one fell swoop, we can probably agree that there isn't a single solution for this. And that actually leads to my main point. The reason we can't solve problems like this is because we aren't trained to think past a natural inclination we have to think in terms of black and white, good and bad, all or nothing. We know that the world isn't really that way, and that there are shades of gray, as we've talked about on this show. But even knowing that, we still fall into a collective pattern of taking sides, drawing lines in the sand and deciding that our side is the only one with the truth. The other guys, anyone who doesn't see things our way, well, they become the enemy, and they're just wrong. Reality isn't just a matter of shades of gray. Even that can give you a wrong working model, because it still lends itself to a pattern of thinking where you are closer to one side than the other. You are more gray or less gray than someone else, and therefore you are closer to the truth of things than someone else. It's not always just a matter of perspective. It's not always just a matter of opinions. Objectively speaking, two or more people who have different or even opposing views, yet swear they're both telling right, can indeed both be right. Each of them can both have real facts and verifiable statistics and laws and history and evidence supporting everything they say. It isn't a problem with their facts or their statistics or their evidence. It's a problem with us and our psychology. We're trained to think in dichotomies, in opposites. If I'm black, then you have to be white. If I'm blue, you have to be red, you see. How do you resolve a problem when both sides of the dichotomy are actually right? How do you disprove the truth of one side when it's just as true as your side? The mistake we make is that we treat problems in human relations and psychology and behavior as though they're the same thing as simple arithmetic problems or problems in the physical sciences. When we can take all the factors or elements of a problem and lay them all out in front of us, or on a blackboard or something, we are really, really good at solving those kind of problems. That's how we've become the masters of our domain when it comes to the physical universe. The elements are complex sometimes, sure, but for the most part, they're right there in front of us, and there were only a limited number of things that could be going on with them, and so the solutions were pretty clear. I don't know that I'm saying anything new when I say that sociology and psychology are infinitely more complex, but so far these problems have not really surrendered to us the same way as the physical sciences, and I don't think they're going to. When you start applying critical thinking to these problems, you quickly find that they grow into these immensely complex issues that defy easy solutions. The best way I could think of to explain it is in terms of 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions. If you consider that any issue has 2 sides, you are only looking at it in 2 dimensions. But problems of human nature and human behavior are 3-dimensional. They go deep. Once you start looking past the surface, only then can you start tackling what's really going on. The complexity of the problem with stuff like this is that both sides are actually true. In fact, more than both sides, because that's just two. There are many sides. All of them are true. So taking only one side or the other is not going to resolve anything. It ignores factors in the problem that can't be ignored. So my point is that it always comes back to us, to our nature, and our inability to resolve the complexity of the problems we create. When we get together in large groups, the larger the groups we're in, the more complex the problems become, and this can't be ignored as part of the situation. This is why European solutions get us nowhere here in the United States. They are solutions for significantly smaller groups of people who are dealing with much different history, culture, and values. We can't just rely on some other entity to resolve everything. It's a people problem, not a government problem. We can't just regulate away our nature. Human beings are what we are. Critical thinking just shows you over and over again the complexity of things, not the simplicity of them. Getting above the dichotomies is the hardest part of critical thinking and living. When all sides are true, you can't win a debate or argument by taking sides. Instead, you have to rise above the need to take sides. Look at all the factors and start resolving all of them as a whole. So, that being said, I found an example of what I'm talking about here in an article that was written by Mark Manson this week about the actual psychology and profiles of mass shooters and how none of them fit any kind of stereotype, nor do any of them fit the mold painted by the media. Believe it or not, we've actually been given some pieces of false information by some of the stories that we read in the immediate wake of some of these mass shootings, and we make decisions based on some of those pieces of information and decide things should be a certain way or that laws should be a certain way or whatever. And again, it falls to us as critical thinkers to look more deeply to find the actual truth of the thing. So this guy, Mark Manson, had some interesting things to say. Mark details a lot of the information that is not generally known about some of the mass shooters, their psychology, their history, and how they broadcast some of their intentions to their family and friends before they actually did what they did. He says, gun control gets the headlines. Mental health care gets the headlines. Violence and video games and misogyny and internet forums and atheism. The list is endless at this point. Here's what doesn't get the headlines. Empathy, listening to those around you, even if you don't like them very much. We have come to live in a culture where it's taboo or unacceptable to simply check in with people emotionally and offer some empathy and understanding. I'm not saying this would magically fix all gun violence. I'm just saying that all of these things, the lack of gun laws, the lack of health care, the inability to have basic conversations with friends and neighbors about what's going on with them, these are all extensions of a callous and self-absorbed culture that lacks any real empathy. Despite being relevant and important discussions, the glamorous headlines are ultimately distractions. They just feed into the carnage and the attention and the fame the killer desired. They are distractions from what is right in front of you and me and the victims of tomorrow's shooting, people who need help. And while we're all fighting over whose pet cause is more right and more true and more noble, there's likely another young man out there, maybe suicidally depressed, maybe paranoid and delusional, maybe a psychopath, and he's researching guns and bombs and mapping out schools and recording videos and thinking every day about the anger and hate he feels for this world. And no one is paying attention to him. I was very impressed with Mark's article on this issue because it looked deeper, and it was an example of the three-dimensional thinking that I'm talking about when you're looking at an issue as complex as mass shootings, mass shooters, the psychology behind them, and the cultural, social, political causes and effects of these things. They're big issues, and it doesn't come down to if we do this, it will all go away. If we do that, it will all go away.
There's no one answer for that.
That's kind of my point, because what we tend to get into is a one solution must fit all sort of thinking.
And I don't know if I necessarily agree with Mark's assumption that maybe if we just all talk to one another, things would be a little bit better. Do I completely disagree with that? No, absolutely not. I do believe that we are a culture that has drifted away from really connecting with one another, and I don't think it's something that's happened within the last 20 years or so. This has been going on for a while.
One could argue that it goes back to the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution and the machine age, and
Well, there is a book that I have been reading off and on for a while called Bowling Alone. It's a very good book talking about how society used to have these communities that everyone was involved in outside of just your church. Men would go bowling, and they would have just a community center. Women had the Tupperware parties. They had sewing groups, things like that. And we don't do stuff like that anymore, where we've kind of become a culture of go to work, go home, watch TV, get on the internet, keep to yourself kind of things. One of my sociology professors in college actually used to tell us the story of when he did a study abroad when he was still an undergraduate. I want to say he was in Norway. Not 100% positive at this very moment. Either way, he was in the UK, and there was a couple other American students in the youth hostel that he was staying in, and one American girl and a local girl in the country became friends somehow, and one of the American girls said, "Oh yeah, you and I should hang out and have coffee or go do lunch or something." Like a lot of Americans do, we kind of say that as a platitude. "Oh yeah, we'll do coffee sometime." And the actual appointment never happens, or we never actually hash out a time to go and have coffee with one another. It's just one of those things, we're nice enough to each other where that could possibly happen. And the local girl went to my professor at the time and said, "What did I do wrong?" She said, "We can go have coffee." She's never said when we can do it. I haven't really seen her very much. When I do see her, I said, "Hey." And she goes, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" And she keeps walking. That's kind of the culture that we are, and I see it a lot here, and I try not to fall into it. If someone asks me, "How are you doing today?" I genuinely tell them, "I'm doing great. How are you?" And it's not like I don't want to jump into, "Oh, well, I'm depressed because I have to just go home and sit there and I'm by myself." No, I don't do that to people. If I'm actually in a good mood, I say, "Oh, I'm doing great." If I'm not, it's kind of sucky outside today, but how are you doing? Whatever. So I try to actually interact with people on a personal level. But I do know that in a sociology standpoint, we have evolved in a way that people who look like me, people who think like me, means safety. And so I'm going to stick to my safety. People who are different, people who look different, people who talk different, people who think different is a danger. And so we have just gone through our molding that way. It's a live or die kind of thing. And yeah, we are at a point where that doesn't necessarily mean that anymore, obviously. But I don't know how we can just say, well, if you say hi to someone or have lunch with someone, they're not going to shoot up. You can't make that kind of connection.
Well, I severely doubt that is what Mark is suggesting.
It sounded, when I read the article, that's what it sounded like to me. It sounded a little bit more of, well, maybe we just talk to one another a little bit more. People won't be so inclined to be dangerous, or won't be so inclined to bring a gun or
I think the point
terrible.
is empathy.
Yeah.
And we are in a nation in the United States, and that the differences with the United States need to be stressed in regards to talking about mass shootings, because they are a factor, right? The differences of the United States versus some of these other countries we've talked about and glorified in internet memes and Facebook walls and whatnot. Oh, Sweden, wonderful Sweden, if we could all just be like Sweden. And or Denmark or wherever, right? They have automatic, minimum wage is $25 and everybody gets a college education and everybody has a gun and these sorts of things. And
everybody has a gun, nobody has bullets.
Well, the thing is that it's an apples and oranges comparison, and It's made to be apples and apples, but it's not apples and apples. there are 319 million people in the United States.
Yes.
I think you could probably fit Denmark in, to Rhode Island or something. I mean, I haven't run the numbers. I'm just saying it's probably not Rhode Island size, but it's not as large as the United States by any stretch, right?
Right.
And those numbers matter. And I was just thinking about this when you were talking about our culture. There are so many people in the United States. We have huge schools, huge corporations where people work, huge bodies of people on the streets of every major city.
Yes.
How do you connect when you're faced with a flood of people and it feels overwhelming?
Right.
And so my answer to that would be, well, this is not a call to, again, this isn't a one solution thing. I'm not even suggesting it's one solution, and I don't think Mark is either. But
it's a pillar.
It is a pillar. It's a pillar of our compassion and, like the word he uses, empathy for one another, that if someone had reached out to any one of these shooters, I'm not saying that necessarily would have guaranteed that they would not still be a violent person. But
it
on the
obviously
other hand,
wasn't. He was talking about the Columbine shooters in the beginning of his article. They had girlfriends. They had friends. One of them even had therapy visits for a long time. They got arrested. Somebody was in their life paying attention to something that they're doing.
Right. There's no suggestion here that every one of these cases is preventable, or that every one of these people who are true psychopaths are going to be helped by a conversation. I'm not that naive, and I don't think anybody is.
Okay.
Right? That's not the point. The point is that perhaps some people, perhaps earlier, before they're so far down the road, that they've gone so far down the path of despair and apathy and destruction and self-destruction for themselves, perhaps even one or two or three people could be headed off at the pass if we had a bit more compassion and empathy for one another. I happen to think that could be true, because I can think of times in my own life where I had maybe not so wonderful things happen to me, and if somebody had stopped and said, even if my parents had said, hey, what's going on? Maybe my life would have taken a different course.
It's just very sad that as of right now, the only thing that we can possibly think about, or the only thing that is obtainable, is that we try to head off one or two.
Well, I'm throwing that out there in a conservative fashion.
No, I understand.
I think that the effects of a whole population doing something like this would be much, much more than that.
Well, what the point I'm trying to say is there's nothing that we can actually do quickly or within a suitable time frame to just shut this all down. The only thing that's fathomable for us to do right now is to maybe head off a couple if we can. And I think that's pitiful for such an industrial first world country as we are.
Well, and that's kind of in our case in the United States, part of the problem psychologically and sociologically, I think, is our technological advances are such. I mean, this is the source of endless numbers of jokes and memes and whatnot. Is the zombie apocalypse is here. Look at everybody walking down the street staring into their cell phones rather than talking to one another.
I don't like that. Haven't you ever seen the meme of, you have a bunch of teenagers in today's age, and they're sitting there with their phones, and people are like, oh, well, we don't talk to one another. And then there's a train car full of people reading the newspaper and not speaking to one another either. People talk to one another. We just do it in a different way.
I'm not down on the electronics of it. I'm saying that culturally, we are not in touch with each other to the degree that we have been in the past.
I think we're more in touch with one another. I think we are.
I don't know about that.
And the problem is we're too in touch with one another. The fact that I know that the new Black Whopper will turn your poop green is really annoying to me right now. But I truly think that with our electronics, with the internet, I know more about people all over the country, all over the world, that I never would have known had I not had this technology. So I think that we have a better way to reach out with one another. It's just there's also an easier way for negativity to be reached out.
Exactly. It's a double-edged sword.
I've
said almost from the get-go of, some of the miracles of the internet and the miracles of the information age that it is a double-edged sword because I believe in the end that the benefits outweigh the pros outweigh the cons because the proliferation of information across the world has had such amazing and positive effects. But it has its dark side where now things you really maybe didn't want to know.
And there's an anonymity about being online. People don't have to know that it's you saying all those horrible things. Or that it's you saying, well, I'm going to shoot up a school. And it's you seeing someone say that and go, you know what, if you do it like this, it might be a little bit better for you. That is a problem.
Right.
I don't think it's a matter of we're not speaking to one another. I think it's what we're saying to one another.
Again, a multifaceted problem.
Yes.
No one size fits all here. No effort to make that the case.
Right.
Right? But good points being made on a lot of fronts with this. And this article, we'll post the link to it in the show notes because I think it's well worth reading by Mark Manson here. Only because to me, it's an example of some good critical thinking applied to a situation that very little critical thinking has been applied to over the last week.
Yeah.
And that's what impressed me about it and got me thinking in terms of the three-dimensional thinking on these issues rather than two-dimensional thinking. You mentioned just now what we're saying, and I agree with that. I think also that what we're saying comes or springs from how we're looking at things. And I don't know that, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, we were doing such a championship job of looking at things. This isn't some conservative rant against modern education or something. I'm actually saying more along the lines of we need to evolve further in our thinking and be active thinkers. I've used that term before, to look past the window pane. So many of us think we don't have the time, we don't have the energy, we don't have the education or whatever to look deeper into these issues, but I think that's part of what keeps them going, and then we decide instead that we have to draw a line in the sand and this is where I stand on it, and God damn it, you're just an asshole if you disagree with me, and then we make the mistake of talking that way anonymously to other people online, and it just gets crazy.
We're also an ADD kind of nation, you know what I mean?
If
it's not a short BuzzFeed video, I probably won't hear a lot about it.
And I certainly fall into the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's in fact why I actually this week changed how I'm using social media.
I saw that.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to make some statement that I think the world needs to do what I'm doing. That's not at all my point. I just decided that my social media needs to be social, not antisocial. And I find that I need to take time, personally, to examine issues and look more deeply into things. And that when I always regret it. Always. Every 100% of the time regret it when I make some knee-jerk, whip-snap response to something. And then I look back after I get some more facts and I take the time to look more deeply into something. And I look back at some of the things I said and I just go, Jesus, what an asshole I was.
Right.
So I decided to stop doing that.
I think it's easier for me that I have found a few very credible places to go that I really trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I do my own research. I trust their research. So and I made the comment, if I don't watch it on a BuzzFeed, I don't know. That's not true.
Good.
That's definitely not true.
Thank God.
I will hear about it and then I'll go, was that... Because I did it with the freaking county clerk woman. I really don't want to say her name anymore.
Oh, yes. Ms. D.
People were saying stuff about her and I've looked it up. There's so many political source fact checkers that you can go find. There's a lot of very credible bloggers out there that you can look for because they will pick up the phone and call people. I think that's just damn good journaling. That's what you're supposed to do. So yeah, and I, just like you, I still do have my knee-jerk reactions because, like I said, I am an emotional person.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have my reactions, and I am trying to be better at that. And that is something that I have really, I feel like I've gotten better at recently. And when I say recently, I mean within the last 8 or so months. So.
No, but I think that you're absolutely right about the fact that it takes effort, it takes training, it takes work. You know, this whole critical thinking thing that I've been on for the last couple of years has always been an effort to improve myself, not an effort to stand on a soapbox and say, I'm right and everybody else is wrong.
Right.
Right? This has been a path of discovery for me and a path of learning. And everything that I've ever put out there as a critical thinker has been what do you guys think about this? Sort of a thing, more so than I'm now going to take everybody to school.
Right. Like you and I both have kind of started to put ourselves out there as in leadership roles, I would like to say. With me at the Secular Hub and also with Denver Atheist and things like that, my blog, other things. If I want people to listen and respect me, I can't just be shouting nonsense.
Exactly.
There needs to be some information to back me up, some facts. And you did point out earlier that 2 completely different sides can have 2 completely different sets of facts. But I think what comes from that is that you need to make sure your facts are from a credible source. Because there are definitely people out there that, and I took a class on this in college, you can make a survey say whatever you want. You can make the information say whatever you want.
Well, yeah, there's twisting facts, and
Absolutely.
and that wasn't exactly what I meant earlier when I was talking about how 2 or more sides of an issue can both be truth. I meant real truth. I meant objective truth. For example, let me just throw this out there so I give a concrete example of what I was talking about.
Okay.
On the gun control issue, the gun control advocates have some very, very substantive and evidence-based facts behind some of what they're saying, right? In terms of percentages of people who've been killed and numbers of comparatives to other countries, and the fact that certain gun regulation laws have reduced violence in certain situations or in certain country situations. Mm-hmm. That's true. That's not a lie. It's not an exaggeration. It's not hyperbole. It's just as true on the part of people who are gun rights advocates that the Second Amendment says exactly what it says. And that in the United States, I'm just saying in terms of a piece of truth, we do have the right to bear arms right now. That is a piece of truth.
Okay.
Right?
I misunderstood you because I was hearing that people can have facts for the same issue that are both correct. And to me, that means I have a figure that says this many people are killed, and I have a figure on this side that says this many people are killed. And so that's what I thought you were saying.
Not exactly.
Okay.
No, I meant objective truths.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? Because the thing with critical thinking and the thing with logic and reason is you can't be a critical thinker or somebody who is on the side of logic and reason if you only pay attention to or only cherry pick your facts.
Right.
Right? And facts are objective truths. They're things that are, they're evidence-based. They're real-world truths, right? So you can take fact A and fact B and fact C. Well, the gun right guy might have fact A, and the gun regulation guy might have fact B. Well, they're both true, right? So if you're going to resolve that issue between those two, you have to acknowledge the truth of both sides.
Right.
You can't take one side and go, well, fact A doesn't matter.
Right.
That's not intellectually honest.
Right.
And it's actually that kind of thinking that perpetuates the black and white, us versus them, let's take sides thing that keeps these things going. And I'm not saying that's the only thing that keeps these going, but they sure as hell keeps the Facebook and internet chat forums and comment sections and all the discussion that goes on these issues is kept at an antagonistic and unresolvable level because all the facts are not being acknowledged by all sides.
Sometimes our emotions tend to step in front of our rational thinking.
And that's what I meant when I said it's our human nature that actually gets in the way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a constant battle, fighting that.
Yeah.
And training ourselves out of that and maybe someday, evolving beyond our gut level, you hit me, I have to hit you back.
Maybe we have to have an Independence Day situation to bring us all together, where aliens come down and attack us, so the only way that we can defeat them is that we all combine together. And earlier I said I wasn't a sci-fi fan, but I love that movie.
Independence Day.
I love that movie.
Yep.
It's an interesting sociology movie to watch. That and District 9.
Oh, very much so. District 9 is probably one of the most ultimate statements about racism and bigotry and government problems. And I mean, there's so many
immigrant
levels
issues, absolutely,
at that movie.
Yep.
And boy, I really did like that movie.
It's a really interesting sociology one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You are listening to the Sensibly Speaking podcast. Isn't it about time someone made some sense around here? Well, that's our critical corner for the week, and I hope that might balance out some of our more passionate statements from last week that were, very much from the heart and very visceral. And so now that I've had some time to think about that, we could do some more sensible speaking about that subject, and we're going to move on now to our news segment. In the news this week, we're going to lead with 3 stories that are all education-based, different aspects of education, and I think you'll find these interesting. The first one is out of Texas. McGraw-Hill, the textbook producing company, is now going to rewrite their textbook after a mother complained about this. A mother who called out a caption in her son's world geography textbook has started a social media firestorm and has convinced the book publisher to change its language regarding the slave trade. Ronnie Dean Buren received a text message from her son Kobe Buren last week that included a photo of a page in the Texas 9th graders McGraw-Hill textbook. Now, I'm going to say right now, and for those who don't know, that Texas is important in terms of textbooks because they are the state that orders more textbooks than any other state in the United States, and therefore they are the trendsetters when it comes to what is or isn't going to be in the textbooks for the nation.
Basically, whatever they come up with, other textbooks fall in line.
So what we're dealing with here is a mother bucking the system successfully, and in this case, very, very correctly.
Yes. The
problem that she had was a caption next to a map that was talking about the slave trade back in the day. The quote here, "The Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations." So, referring to slaves by whitewashing them as workers is very, very definitely intellectually dishonest at any grade level. Because we're talking about a single word here.
Right.
And, when you say the word workers, well, your 6th grader could think construction worker, could think dock worker, could think plumber, and
whatever
and
they think monetary compensation or some kind of compensation.
That's right.
For the work that they are doing.
Exactly, which the slaves, of course, did not have any of at all.
No.
In fact, probably worst life ever, and certainly not something that you would describe by calling them workers.
Right.
You would call them, quite accurately, slaves.
Yes.
A heinous and horrible part of our history here in the United States, and one that none of us should be proud of, but at the same time, none of us should be whitewashing or repainting or revising.
Nope. What really got to me about this story was, one, I was thrilled that they actually listened, and they are going to be changing. But the other thing that really got to me were the comment sections. And I know I should not read comics. Or I should not read the comments. I know that. I really know I shouldn't. But people are pointing out that, oh, well, it wasn't just Americans who got them. European people got slaves. And other tribes in Africa were grabbing other tribes and selling them. And the first slave was a white person. The first slave owner was a black person here in the United States. Awesome that you know that information. Thank you for letting me know that information. The fact that we're looking at here is not who had slaves and who did what. What we're looking at here is that we're pretending it wasn't as bad and as awful as it was. I'm aware, because I have studied history and society and cultures all over the world from all different time frames. I'm aware that we've all enslaved one another at one point or another. I know that. But when we pretend like it wasn't a bad thing, or we pretend that it was not as horrifying, or maybe it just didn't really happen the way that we thought it was, is not helping. What that is saying, oh, well, it happened, but it doesn't really matter. No, it matters. It matters for our future. It matters for who we are now. We need to be aware that bad things have happened, and we learn from that, and we hopefully change that. That's why it's an issue.
Good news being that McGraw-Hill saw this controversy and actually posted on their own Facebook page that they are changing this content.
Yep. They've already changed the digital version, I believe.
Yes, it says that they changed it immediately. And the next print run, they'll change the books.
Next print run next year.
Well, fortunately, digital books apparently are in quite a bit of use in the school systems these days.
Yeah, it's cheaper.
So there we're talking about a matter of historical revisionism through the textbook publishing companies. And, of course, they're influenced by whatever social groups or educational groups are trying to sway them in whatever direction they're trying to. This next story has to do with social influence in the classroom, and specifically in the science classroom. And again, this has to do with the textbook, where there's controversy over GMO foods. And the article says here, and this was actually from quite a while ago this year. This was back from January of this year. Textbook agrees to update controversial message on GMO foods. This is a 6th grade science textbook that apparently was giving the pros, but not the cons, of genetically engineered crops. Apparently, a health blog put up a page out of this science textbook where they highlighted that the textbook was saying that genetically modified crops can produce more food, have more nutrients, fight disease and insects, and need fewer chemical pesticides. All of which, as far as I know, are scientifically validated truths.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, the problem that this health blog had with the textbook is that no downsides of the GMOs are mentioned, despite frequent reports that genetically modified crops, which means the injecting of species with DNA from other plants and animals, may have troubling long-term health and environmental effects that are not yet known.
Except that we've been manipulating crops for centuries. Are we going to skip over that?
I think the issue here, and the reason I wanted to bring this up, is because we're talking about 6th graders now.
Right.
And we're talking about social issues or social controversies, not scientific controversies, because as far as I know in the scientific community, there isn't a lot of controversy about GMOs.
No.
But in the social and health world, there certainly is, because there's no shortage of people who have, drawn their line in the sand in regards to GMOs and have stated, unilaterally that no GMO should exist of any kind whatsoever, and they want to have nothing to do with it. I believe that such statements are founded in ignorance, not stupidity. I use the word ignorance advisedly here, meaning that there is a lack of facts known by such people because they are taking a rather extreme view on something that actually has some benefits to, people, and that's why GMOs exist.
Somewhere along the way in this culture, chemicals became like this very nasty, bubbly, awful word. And when I say bubbly, I mean like
a bubbling over cauldron.
Yeah, like a cauldron.
Yes.
It's green and
Yes.
bubbles.
That's right.
And my knee-jerk reaction here is to go, damn hippy dippies. And that's not what it is. And I know that.
Many of those who are on these health blogs are very fit, trim, cropped hair, exercise.
Well, I'm not gonna
type people.
I'm not gonna say that people who exercise are bad people. No, that's not where we're going here right now.
No.
I'm not a fit, trim person, so I can't sit here and go, oh well, they just want to eat grass and damn skinny people. No, that's not what I'm doing here right now. I'm concerned for these people who kind of fall into the celebrity worship of chemicals cause autism, and chemicals make us sick, and modifying food, it's not natural anymore. Okay, we live in a culture that processes everything, and it makes sense to eat more healthy food, eat some things that are organic. But the thing is, like you said, we have 319 million people in this country, and we also send we send food
abroad to many,
many countries. We have to have these foods that grow quickly. They repel diseases and things like that. We need to be able to feed ourselves.
Well, and that's how this all evolved, was through mass production means.
Right.
In order to feed lots and lots of people at once, right? Because you can't feed millions of people
right.
Using the same techniques that old civilization Europeans used in rotating their crops and all that sort of thing. Now, I'm no expert on this by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, neither am I. I'm not pretending to be.
No, me neither. I know that there are pros and cons on all sides of this, right? Again, applying a little bit more of the, let's take the three-dimensional view of this rather than the two-dimensional view.
Right, but I think we need to get back to your point of why this is an issue for sixth graders.
Well, and that's the thing. Here we're talking about something that is a social issue, and for some people, a health issue, right? But it's not a science issue.
Right.
Because the science on this is the science on it, right? We genetically modify food. When we do so, it has effect A and effect B and effect C. This we know. There is thought that maybe we're also having effect X and Y and Z. Those effects are not proven. The science is still not solid on those things. So, do we teach those things because it's a contentious social issue in a science class?
Right.
That's what attracted me to this story, was at what level do we have our students decide where they should necessarily be deciding on social issues, or do we just teach them straight science?
I am concerned about that too. I don't have children, but I am concerned about how much pressure we are putting on kids to take a social side.
The role of school, first and foremost, has to be, teach facts.
Yes.
Right? Now, when you want to get into social debates or debates on things that may or may not have future consequences, I don't think that we should be putting the burden of that on sixth graders. I think that maybe would be appropriate for high school level, where you have people who are a bit more aware of what's going on in the world, a bit more socially aware, a bit more internationally aware, hopefully by that point.
Right.
And are able to think through the idea of, okay, here's the science. Now, here are potential future consequences of that science. I very much would like to see that being taught.
Right.
And so I wouldn't really have a problem with teaching potential hazardous consequences of known science at a level that's appropriate to teach it.
Right.
When you get into teaching sixth graders this, I think you're pushing a social agenda on a person who lacks the ability to fully judge all the consequences of what you're talking about. Now, absolutely cannot sit here and say no sixth grader can grasp this.
No.
Not my point. I'm talking in terms of mass education now. Will your average sixth grader grasp this? grasp all the consequences of it and be able to think through all the various things that we're talking about.
Right.
I don't think so.
I don't know. Thinking back to myself as a 6th grader, and I'm not trying to put myself down, I just don't know if I would have been able to have a intellectual discussion about anything like
I know
this.
I couldn't have.
No.
And I wasn't stupid. I was an A student in school. I very much grasped the subjects that were being taught to me.
There's just different priorities
exactly
for a 6th grader versus, myself in my 30s, grader. Things like that. Yeah.
Right.
There's a different thing. And I think when you get into this murky water of pushing a social agenda on children this young or even younger, it's very deceitful, because then it's a matter of, I'm telling you this is bad or this is good.
Right. You have to, you're putting a value evaluation on something that really they should be deciding for themselves or figuring out for themselves.
Yes.
Because it's a social issue. It's not proven science. We're not talking about hard science here. You would never ask a student to decide, does 2 + 2 = 4? It simply is.
Right.
Right?
Just like you don't want to teach sex ed to a 3rd grader. And when you do start pushing these social agendas on kids this young, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them as they age to let go of that or change their opinion or even attempt to do some research to figure out if that's the correct thought process.
That's right. And that's where my concern really goes.
Right.
I would much rather be teaching children at the younger ages the known facts, provable facts, straight up, here's how things are as we understand them. And as they progress through their education at the higher levels, you then start getting into the evaluation of that information and move into broader topics based on that information so they can start making value judgments on it. And that's Chris Shelton's theory of education.
Did you have a critical thinking class in high school?
No.
I did.
I am so happy to hear that.
And it was an elective, and I really think more people should have taken it. And I really think it shouldn't be an elective.
I agree with you completely that it should not be an elective. And again, I think high school or maybe middle school, like 8th grade, like right before high school, might be the time to hit people with that.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we should necessarily be trying to teach logical fallacies and argument and logic theory to 6th graders.
Right. This was more of, I got quizzes and riddles and things a lot. And it was super fun.
Cool. Our last story for this week is out of Florida, which is our favorite place.
Yay.
And this is a story from actually this very week. A conservative Florida mom vows to stop her children from learning about Islam and Arabic numerals. And I'm going to have Ruth actually go over the details on this one.
This one makes me giggle just because I grew up in Florida. These are my people. This is my shame. It doesn't actually specify specifically where she's from, but it just says, okay, I'll just read the first bit of this here. A Florida mom posted a rambling 15-minute video to her Facebook account complaining that her son's high school world history textbook spends an entire chapter on Muslims and advances in the Islamic world, including an origin of Arabic numerals. And I did not say that wrong. This is how this woman pronounces Arabic. She says Arabic. And I'm just going to sidebar here. Just because I hear this so much down south, apparently it's difficult to say Arabic. So it comes out Arabic, and I don't think that this should be argued as a potato kind of thing.
It's not. It's ignorance.
It is. It's very frustrating.
And by the way, just to intro this story, this is a high school textbook that we're talking about here. So we're both pretty much in agreement on the idea that the things that this woman is talking about and has a problem with are things that are completely appropriate for her child to be learning at his level of school.
So I'm reading from a Raw Story article here, and a paragraph in here says, touching upon developments in education, astronomy, architecture, art, agriculture, science, and mathematics in the Islamic world. The mother, her name is Christian Normandin. I like that. Normandin drew attention to the development of the Arabic numeric system, the most common numeric system used in the world today. So I watched her 15 minutes video. She had an issue with a graphic that showed 1 through 10 in, ancient Arabic, modern Arabic, and then it also had just, our standard 1 through 10. This is an ignorant thing that she is unaware that our number system comes from Arabic numbers. I don't know how to put 3 sentences together right now.
One gets the idea in listening to this woman's rant because she recorded a 15-minute rant on Facebook.
15 minutes.
Yes, going over the details of this. And I don't begrudge her right to do that, actually. And,
no.
And actually, if more people spoke their mind, hey, great. But, when somebody makes as ignorant a rant as this one, I'm certainly going to have something to say about it. Well, so I'm not trying to shut her up. I'm actually trying to school her.
Well, she has an issue because the chapter is on the Islamic culture. She's incapable of separating the culture from the religion. A lot of people have a hard time with that. It's the same as when you meet a Jewish person. They have their Jewish cultures, and they can still eat kosher if they want to. They still say a few words in Yiddish every now and then, but they may not be religious anymore. They are culturally Jewish. It's the same with Islam. You can be culturally Islamic. Muslim is the religion. So there can be a separation there. It's a deeply rooted religion within the culture. But like this just said, education, architecture, anything.
Well, there's undeniable ties in our own history going back. Western civilization has its origins in Arabic culture.
Yes.
It's undeniable. The numbers we write, the letters we use. I mean, so many of the pieces of technology that we use were math. So much of our science comes straight out of that culture from centuries ago. So, of course, our children should be being taught about it.
I said that backwards. Muslim is the culture, Islam is the religion.
Okay.
So I said that backwards. So it's interesting that people have a hard time with that, separating the two. And she did say in here that she was upset that Christianity was not mentioned more in the book. And she is also upset that the book or the chapter did not point out on the negative side of the Islamic religion. I don't really know why she needed to point that out.
Well, because basically she's a bigoted, racist, Islamophobe.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really, if we're going to cut to the chase,
next time
that's who this woman is.
Next time there's a textbook that's talking about Christianity, I'm going to be really upset that it's not pointing out the Westboro Baptist Church more. Because if you're going to do that, be prepared for someone to point out the extremist in your religion. And I'm not doing this to say, oh, well, we have to coddle Islam. No. Their extremists are fucking crazy. Just like our extremists are fucking crazy. And don't think that Christian extremists don't blow shit up. Because they do. This is just one of those things that I'm watching her video, and I'm just getting sadder and sadder and sadder about the blatant bigotry, ignorance of this. And it's even sadder that it's from the South, because I tried to change it from the inside. It's too hard, so I moved away.
And the reason, of course, one of the reasons we're talking about this in terms of the news is because this was an interesting counter to the historical revisionism that was occurring in Texas through the efforts of the textbook publisher. Here we have the other side of the coin, where here is the parent demanding that willful ignorance be the order of the day with their own children, actually demanding that their children be kept stupider because of their short-sightedness and ignorance of how things have actually worked in the world.
Right. She was also upset that the chapter mentioned both the Christians and the Muslims are criticized for committing appalling atrocities in the name of religion during the Crusades. And she basically just kind of half-heartedly dismissed that by saying, you're not telling the truth about the Crusades.
Exactly. So here we have an actual objective truth being voiced about the Crusades.
Right.
And it's, of course, can't be true because Christians have never done anything bad in their entire history. And so here's somebody literally panting to have historical revisionism executed in her child's textbooks, whereas you go over to Texas and we're panting to get the historical revisionism out of the textbooks. So, it just, again, human nature is just crazy sometimes, it's enough to just make you...
If you find it, if you do have a few 15 minutes just to be pissed off, watch it, because just for the simple process of her going Arab and Shira law, like she can't say the words, they physically can't come out of her mouth correctly, and it's just fascinatingly appalling.
It is. It's sort of one of those the fascination with which you'll watch a train wreck or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't take your eyes off it, and yet it's so horrifying to watch.
She's holding her phone from the most terrible angle. You get a lot of cleavage for someone who's supposed to be very pious.
That.
Yes, I'm sure you didn't. And it's just Arab, and it grates on me.
With that, we are actually at the end of our show for this week. So I'm glad we had a chance and opportunity to put some more critical thinking down, and I hope that that was appreciated by some of our listeners, and that we hear about that in the comments. We love hearing from you guys. Sometimes I get emails. More often than not, we get comments. Please do also, if you are a listener of this show, go to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and tell your friends about us, because the more people we can reach, the more sense we can bring out there. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next time.